But that idea is in all three books. The idea of that notion of this is a terrible way of saying it, but the middleness of relating to another human being that you love, that not being in the future, not at the beginning, not projecting the end, but placing yourself right in the middle of it. It's in the Folded Cloth so much, and it's so much in the Argonauts to be inside that middleness of that experience of loving someone. Yeah. And so, do you want to talk about that at all? I know it's.
What, Heidi? What do you think I should say? I don't know.
What should you say?
That was almost
You're planning the panel. No.
We can move
Yeah,
on
no,
to
that's the good part, right? I mean, that's the good part. Yeah.
I mean, here's what I would be curious about with you guys. Like, do you feel like when you were writing your books that you were happier in your life? Or, like, you know? Like, what's your...
happier.
Like the needle just came off the record.
What? Well, no, I mean, because both of your, I think part of what's so, I don't know, like devourable isn't even the word, but part of what's so like, I mean, I just felt so sucked into both of your books is that I felt like I was encountering minds that were just like in their lives. And I don't know that, like that seems like such a modest goal, but I don't feel like I feel like it's hard to be that person. I mean, in a weird way, we're just like, be present. Like, it's so trite. Mm-hmm. But on a certain level, I mean, did you feel like you were more in your life when you were writing these books? Because it felt, I don't know, it felt like there was this, like, somehow, like, you just felt, like, sucked onto a track, like, in a good way. Sucked onto a track doesn't sound like a good thing.
I mean, literally, so much of this book was written, and some people here have seen it, I think, maybe Ethan has seen it, but, you know, literally, like, written in, like, a tough shed that was delivered to my house. It's at the top of a hill looking down at my house, and...
Wait, say what a tough shed is, just in case.
Well, you can go to a catalog, and if you don't have a place, like a room of your own, and you have, like, $2,000, you can have a tough shed delivered in a 3-hour period, and there's no foundation needed. It's just like, you know, it just will, it's like a 7-year guarantee, and they'll just put it, they bring it like, you know, 4 walls, and they just will, you know, just put the wall, whatever, you know, 4 walls, floor, whatever. Anyway, 4 parts, and they put it together. So the point is that the point I'm trying to make, though, is that I definitely didn't feel more in my life, because quite literally,
you were out of it.
Quite literally, I was like looking back down and like could hear the baby crying in the house, and like, but when a lot of this book was written, when I
is that
was
T-U-F-F, Tough House?
T-U-F-F.
It is.
Shed.
Oh,
Shed.
Tough
Yes,
Shed.
exactly.
Sorry, Tough Shed.
Yeah, no, this was advice from Annie Dillard, who was a writing teacher of mine. She told me about the tough sheds back when I was like 19, and it was like in the back of my mind. And then when I was finally going crazy, I was like, she is right. Annie Dillard told me to get a tough shed on the Gowanus Canal once when I didn't have an apartment in New York. She's like, just, it'll take them days to find you. I was like, but the point is that I don't feel like, no, I mean, I don't feel like the act of writing, I mean, it might enmesh you in memory or something, but like literally, I feel like I was taking 3 hours, 3 days a week, which is when this book was written, away from, you know, like being a new mom. So it was not I mean, it was very actively about the act of disengagement from that enmeshment was the writing time. I mean, it was just so literal to me, you know.
I mean, I guess it literally has to be, does anybody write? I did see somebody the other day with a baby in the park. Like, the baby was asleep, and they were actually, like, doing work on a park bench, and I was like, where did you get that baby?
Right.
Like, that's like a tough baby. That's a T-U-F-F baby.
Yeah. I think at one point I joke in this book that, you know, like, if you're, like, writing and you have a breast pump on, and I say, like, words, I said, like, you know, both milk and words are being, like, siphoned out, like a cyborg into different machines, you know, it's pretty exhausting. But I definitely feel like that, you know, as I talk about that process in the book, it's like, there's kind of no more literal proof of separation in a way than, you know, like you know, you're not there with the baby, therefore you have to extract this fluid to give it a different time, you know, so it's very much not about that enmeshment, but, you know, I don't.
But I wonder too if there isn't something about that like liquidity, right? Like you're just sort of, no, I mean it. It's just sort of like you're like being so liquid and so out on some level, and everything's just like a big mishmash, and time doesn't. What did you say? It doesn't exist, or it doesn't count, or it doesn't matter.
It's
Whatever.
not a thing.
It's not a thing. Time is not a thing, right? But then that's why you're not like Bukowski anymore, right? Like you need to have some. I don't know. It's almost just right. I mean, there's like some way that like somehow this is allowing you to kind of. I don't know, I feel like my big metaphor these days is seawalls. I was like, I just want some seawalls. Like I want some kind of like concrete thing to like keep all this like liquid everything, like give it some shape, you know?
What, Maggie, the very end of your book is in present tense, isn't that right?
I mean, there's
The
a lot of this
part-
book in present tense.
It dips in and out,
Yeah.
but the part where Harry speaks is in present tense. Am I getting that right? There are probably people in the audience that know the book more intimately even than I.
I don't know.
But what you were saying about this quality of in one's lifeness, I thought, oh, well that's present tense. Like that's like, you know, the easy answer to the question, I guess.
Yeah.
But the last page of my book is in present tense, and the rest of it is in past. And I mean, that's, you know, sort of one of the very easily observed transitions that I make from remembering to being in time, to actually being in the thing that I'm writing about.
So it's that sense of being moving into the present and being locked in the present, but it's also all the books are constantly in a process of selecting and judging. It's your book, right? Doesn't it begin with the question, what is the worth of a day?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of, again, like, not to necessarily go too overboard and like female effluent, right? But I do feel like there was just some sort of sense that it was all, there are these, I think with kids especially, you do just feel like one big kind of leaking, you just feel like you're leaking in one way or another, you know? And that it felt very unquantifiable, I guess, in some sense, and I just was desiring to just kind of, be able to kind of track, just sort of track how things were, just track how your life was ticking past in some very basic way. I mean, it was just such a basic, and I think, honestly, and this so relates to actually Sarah's first book, part of the impetus for me to write this, Sarah's, not first book,
Anyway.
prior book, The Two Kinds of Decay, which is about, and speaking of liquidity, I mean, that's all that book is about. She, for those of you who haven't read it, she had a terrible disease and ongoing but requiring all of her blood to basically be taken out of her body and separated, and you can talk about the actual medical specificity of it. I'm speaking in purely medically precise terms right now. But I had a very mild, like so mild in comparison to what Sarah went through. Just a momentary like glimpse at, oh my God, I was misdiagnosed with an autoimmune disease that would have basically just been like the end, you know, like just like from here on forward, you will not be yourself, your life is going to suck. And you know, like the doctor in one amazingly uplifting website that I went on said, it won't kill you, but you'll wish it would, right? And so, anyway, so this was, I got to kind of stare this in the face for a tiny bit, and then really realized how this kind of self-container for the person, like it was so, who I was inside was so not directly, like this was an unreliable container, and when it failed, like even if I was still alive for many, many decades, the self I was couldn't come out. And so I think that was really on a very basic level the impetus to write this, because I was like, oh wow, I suddenly was looking at my kids are just gonna know this other person, this like, this pain, kind of hampered other person. And I suddenly thought, oh my gosh, wait, okay, so I escaped this. All you have to do is have one run-in with something like this, and then you're just like, oh, and the clock is ticking, right? And so I just thought, all right, well, I want to outsource this. I just want to outsource this self as quickly as possible while I can, while the channel is open. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was really, it was kind of, yeah, just
Upload it, offload it.
offload, upload, download, outsource, choose your verb, yes.
No, but you wanted like a remote storage container.
I
for it.
wanted a, yes, I did,
That's what you mean.
exactly
I get
what
it.
I wanted, yeah,
Unreliable container.
Yeah.
It's a great phrase.
but right?
Unreliable narrator, unreliable container.
It's an unreliable container, but as you well know, I mean, you know better than any of us how unreliable the container can be.
I think none of us is a stranger to pain. I
Yeah.
heard on a TV show once. Twin Peaks season 2. Carol Smith. But that's a little bit non sequitur. Maybe is there like a
But
oh, no.
okay, let me open up a little bit beyond that, because the notion of the body as, just an unreliable container or not a defined container or in flux is something that is in very different ways, an experience that you all share in some way, or that's in the books. And it's so interesting that the writers stepping, the relationship to the body and bodies is so present in all of your work in really interesting ways. And I mean, it's especially, Maggie, you just take that apart in so many ways, that notion, not only with Harry, but in so many ways with being a mother, with, do you want to talk about that a little bit in the book? Because it's so interesting how you do that.
Just the notion of body-oriented writing, just generally.
And how the defined margins that we imagine for the, at a very basic level for the body are sort of morphing all the time in the book.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought a lot about this because, there's kind of two different tracks I think of about like writing with the body. Like one is like concretely like writing about bodies, so, that's kind of one thing, and that's in here too. But then there's also writing, and again, I kind of think of this as a poetry thing or more like performative, feeling language in you moving. And I think that there's writing that feels somatic. All writing is somatic, but there's writing that kind of, I think of it a lot about, speed or heat or slowing down or whatever, that it has kind of somatic response. And I think that to me, again, is very much about sound and rhythm and, a lot of those elements. And I think that they're both engaged, in this book. But I guess I just say that because sometimes I think people talk about like writing the body as if you have to be like describing literal things about the body, and there's a lot of different ways. And Time, which Sarah, and The Folded Clock too, are both brilliant examples of, which is that, I don't know, one of my very favorite pages of all of literature is the opening page of Hervé Gubert's To the Friend Who Did Not Save My Life. I don't know if any of you guys know this book, but in the very first page he says, basically like, there was this amazing 30-day period when I thought I was going to die from AIDS, and it turns out I wasn't. I was going to be one of the ones that was miraculously saved. It was this astonishing thing, and then, but that's not the case about neither the rest of the book nor what happened to him in his life. But it's like, but by starting the book, it's about his body. Yes, it's about mortality, but it's more just like, what he's engaged in the sense of the body and time is. It's not a description of lesions or breast milk leaking or whatever. It was it's a shell game that you can play with a writer, like you're saying, with what's in the present tense or what's giving you. You turn the very next page and he says, I'm in Rome, my T cells are down. I've known for a long time I am going to die. So it's a very and then you're just screeched into this other spot. And all that kind of all those elements I think are very interesting at your and they're very finely. They're very high pitched if you're doing autobiography, because there's this there's the beautiful thing about autobiography, which is that the question of who the writing body is, like, is it dead, is it alive, where is it in life right now, is always very up for the reader. It's a version of what people call the autobiographical pact, it's a little bit different, but when people feel like that pact has been violated, it's in part because some of the things that animate autobiographical nonfiction are not the same as some of the things that animate novels or plays or something. And I love that pact and its elements, and think that they're great aesthetic tropes to play with.
One of my favorite lines in all of literature is the last article in Bluets.
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
I mean, do you know what I'm saying? It's unbelievable.
I'm sure it's crib.
Here's where I'll finally get to find that out. But, let me put it this way. When I was alive, I aimed to be less a student of longing than of light. Belonging in the light is beautiful, but the part that I just can't stop thinking about ever since I first read it is when I was alive.
Right. Yeah.
That's how you write an autobiography. I mean, I think that probably was kind of looming over me as I wrote this entire book, because I wanted that effect. I just wanted to be writing as this dead person, which is the freest way to write. I mean, I tried to write this poetry collection from the point of view of a dead person, but I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, that was kind of the trick of that book. Was like the Emily Dickinson, like I'm in the tomb feeling. Of that whole
but
idea
you were more in the tomb in that line.
Heidi, you're having a response to that.
I was just gesturing to that. No, that's just just what you said is just totally amazing, right? Like the freedom of feeling like you are, but like that is that kind of nothing to lose, because you're dead already. So I don't know. That's kind of.
Do you guys know this book? I can't remember what it's called now. It's called like Letter from Montmartre. Does anyone know this book? It's just published anyway. But she is a suicide, and she dedicates the book to herself once she's dead.
Ooh.
And then suicide shortly after turning it in. It was just, like an astonishingly chilling dedication,
Wait, I'm
But
sorry.
like-
This is like it's not a novel. It's
No,
like for
it's
real.
true,
Holy
yeah.
shit!
And
Wow.
that's like the autobiographical pact, super high stakes.
Wow.
But I'm not going there today.
No, you're gonna say I'm not advocating that.
But yeah, it's so fast, but it's so fascinating.
You said something earlier that the stakes I believe you said the stakes for writing autobiographical work are very different from a novel.
Maybe Heidi said so. I
I mean, you were saying that the autobiographical pact is absent in a novel or a play.
Yeah, the autobiographical pact. Can you?
Yeah, what is the autobiographical pact?
Well, there's a part of the pack that's just about that it's true.
I'm glad everyone else
right?
is
That's
like,
the
yeah,
most
the
basic part is that like you're
autobiographical
reading it and
pact,
it's supposed to be, no, it's like it's supposed to be true, right? I mean, that's the basic premise of it. But what that also means is like, say you take in this country, I just think about, I think of slave narratives as a very good exemplar of this, which is just, or captivity narratives, or any of like early American autobiographical forms, which was very much like, the question is how did, the question of how did this person come to be writing this book? Like, how did this book come to be in my hands? Like, how did the slave become free? How did somebody learn? How did literacy happen? How did, in Captivity of Mary Rowlandson, how did she survive this event to be telling this now? I mean, all of those questions, they put a kind of pressure upon, so that there's a kind of question behind the book of how did this come to be in my hands now, which I think is, you could ask that question in a textual scholarship way of any work of art, but there's something, the minute that you die, all of your autobiographical work, that was kind of when I was alive, like someday that will be a true statement, that seems really cool to me.
Before we turn to the audience, I just want to make time if you had particular things about one another's books that you wanted to ask each other, or things that we haven't touched on. There's so much we haven't touched on. The books we could talk all night, but
I was just gonna say one of my kids asked me the other day this question, and I was like, oh my God, no one's ever asked me this question before. They said, have you ever met a cannibal? I was like, that's an amazing question. I turn it to you two. Have you ever met a cannibal?
Wait till the placenta comes out later.
Yes, exactly.
Does self-cannibalization count?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably
no,
not, then.
no. I'm gonna limit that.
I don't think so. I wanted to ask you a really shop-worn, writery question.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Okay, so long as I can turn it back at you. Okay.
Do you think you might ever write again autobiographical nonfiction, or does that seem like you were playing hooky from fiction and
Yeah, I
you
don't
won't do it
know.
again?
I actually feel really terrified that, well, all right, here's a question that I'm sorry not to not answer your question. Well, here's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that I won't ever write fiction again, which is maybe like a good fear to have. I think always, right, you're always like sort of drumming up new precipices for yourself, or new like, right? So I think at a certain point I was like, okay, I am gonna write another book. Like that seems like, for better or worse, that's gonna keep happening. But then, so then I don't know, like I feel really worried that
Because
I
of
won't.
the folded cloth, you feel like.
Just like, I don't know, I just feel like I accessed some way of, I did this because, and I mean, you guys switch genres too, so I'd be interested to know like why, right? Why did you move from, not that you have permanently moved in any way, right? But we've all moved between genres in one way or another. And I like to think that it's a choice, and I can just be like, oh, and now I'm doing this, and now I'm doing that, and now I'm doing that, but it doesn't feel that way right now. It feels like a continuum, and that's a little scarier to me.
Oh, that's so much less scary for
Really?
me. Yeah, I just write the next thing. And
Yeah,
it's, this barrier between poetry and prose, I'm sure you were asked this question with some frequency. I just wrote a book, and then I wrote the next book, and to me, the second book of so-called poetry is prose, and then the third book was prose, but wait a minute, was that fiction? I don't know. And then the next book was definitely prose, and now this is sort of poetic because there's a lot of white space. I worry about so many things, so very many things in life,
yeah.
but I don't worry about what genre the next book is going to be.
I think what I you're right. No, that's a stupid thing to worry about. You're right. Really, in the grand, like I was worried that, yeah. No, you're right. You're right. I'm not gonna worry about that anymore.